On a sunny November day in 2007, a professor went for a day hike in the beautiful Oregon forest. Two people saw him hiking and noticed some strange behavior at the summit of the mountain. He never returned from his hike, and he has not been seen since. Then, 5 years later, another man goes missing from the same area. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. Today, thank you for joining me. My name is Elise, and I am your host. Now, I am admittedly, I don't even know what I'm saying. I am pre recording this because the school year is starting for me, and it is a crazy, crazy time of the year for me. August is literally crazy. I'm pre-recording this. I have loved being doing all the hiking this year and being outside in nature. It's been really nice. Specifically this summer, I stayed in Utah for like the whole summer and did a lot of hiking, and it's just such a beautiful state. So I hope that if you're not traveling like I am, um, you should enjoy your home state and enjoy the nature that's around you. You don't necessarily have to travel to a national park to experience the outdoors. So I hope that you're enjoying wherever you're at right now. So today we are talking about the Three Sisters Wilderness in Oregon. And there are no negative reviews about this area, so I don't have any negative reviews, but this is a very, very interesting case. I had never heard about it before until I found it online. And it's really sad. And it's a perplexing one, right? Like most of the things we talk about here are perplexing, but I think this case specifically is just very bizarre. Now, let's get into it. The Three Sisters Wilderness is a wilderness area in the Cascade Range within the Willamette and Deschutes National Forest in Oregon. It's about 286,000 acres, and that actually makes it the second largest wilderness area in Oregon after the Eagle Cap Wilderness. So it is a vast, vast wilderness area. It was established by the United States Congress in 1964, and it's named for the Three Sisters volcanoes. Now, I lived in Oregon for a while, and I've actually hiked kind of in this area, like adjacent to it, and it is so, so beautiful. So these volcanoes, the three peaks, were known by pioneers as Faith, Hope, and Charity. And there are nearby landmarks that include the husband, the wife, and the little brother. These are super old school names from the pioneers that went to Oregon on the Oregon Trail and kind of, started settling over there. So there are many types of landforms that make up this wilderness area. But because we are talking about volcanoes, you might assume that the most common are volcanic features, and you are right. They are stratovolcanoes that have been formed around 1.6 million years ago. So there's a lot of lava flows that are like, dry, and there's a lot of lava tubes, which I've never been in a lava tube, but imagine a cave, sort of. I'm sure you've seen pictures of them online. I don't like going in caves and lava tubes, so I'm not gonna go seek that out, but cool to look at from the surface. This wilderness area ranges in elevation from 2,000 feet to 10,363 feet, or 610 meters to 3,159 meters. Now, the Three Sisters, North Sister is 10,090 feet, or 3,075 meters. Middle Sister is 10,052 feet, or 3,064 meters. And South Sister is 10,363 feet, or 3,159 meters. These are all found in the eastern portion of the Three Sisters Wilderness. It is beautiful, and a lot of people make it their mission to climb all three sisters. Interesting enough, you might or might not know this, but there is a glacier, and it is the largest glacier in Oregon. It's called the Collier Glacier, and it actually happens to reside between North and Middle Sister. So, super cool. People might go to see that. The headwaters of the Wild and Scenic Creek emerge from the wilderness. It used to be called a derogatory term, creek, and they have changed the name to Waichus, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. So, forest cover in the Three Sisters Wilderness includes Douglas fir, Pacific silver fir, subalpine fir, mountain hemlock, western hemlock, lodgepole pine, and ponderosa pine. And personally, ponderosa is my favorite pine because it smells like vanilla or butterscotch. And if you've never experienced that, I really hope you're you're able to experience this beautiful pine tree that smells like freshly baked goods. It's amazing. So, a large area of the Three Sisters Wilderness is above timberline and contains alpine meadows. So it's a very, very beautiful place to go hiking, just viewing wildlife, bird watching. It's amazing. Popular recreation activities in the Three Sisters Wilderness includes camping, hiking, climbing, and fishing. South and Middle Sister are technically not difficult climbs, but summiting North Sister requires technical expertise and equipment. It's more like mountaineering than hiking. There are more than 260 miles of trails, or 420 kilometers, across the wilderness, including 40 miles, or 64 kilometers, of the Pacific Coast Crest Trail. Sorry, not coast. So it's really, really a nice area to hike in. Now, we are going to be talking about, a specific smaller area, and it's kind of confusing because, this case says one thing, and then, like, I read other things online, so I'm including both of them. So, there is a popular trail called the French Pete Trail, and, it's 9.8 miles, or 15.8 kilometers, and it goes through old growth forest, and it's just a really popular trail, but it's also pretty rugged. And it's located on the western edge of the wilderness near the Cougar Reservoir. But more specifically, we are going to be talking about Olallie Mountain. And to summit the top of this, it's 7.2 miles round trip with about 1,460 feet of elevation gain. So, like for the mileage, that's not too bad for the elevation gain. It usually takes people about 3 hours, to hike it if they're hiking at an average pace of about 2 miles an hour. It's rated as moderate. The trail usage says it's low, so not many this isn't like a super, super popular trail that people do. The highest elevation on this trail is 5,000 I cannot talk, 5,700 feet, and the lowest elevation is 4,525 feet. So, again, this is in the Three Sisters Wilderness and the Willamette National Forest, and it's accessible mid-June through November, but the best time to go is August through November. A lot of people say to avoid June and July due to, like, absolutely horrendous mosquitoes. Um you do have to have a permit, just like one that you fill out. It's not like crazy if you're doing it June 15th through October 15th, and that's available at the trailhead. And, this isn't like some people do this trail, but it's not super popular. The trail allows dogs, horses, and camping, and possible dangers include whoa, sorry guys, that was my dog. I am home alone today recording, so I don't have my husband here to babysit the dog so he doesn't bark. So, like I said, this isn't super popular, and one of the possible dangers listed is hiking through a burn scar. And if you're not familiar with hiking safety, this could be dangerous because if it starts to rain, landslides easily happen through burn scars and flooding. So, let's talk more specifically about this trail in this area. So, I found this on hikeoregon.com. I have followed this woman for years because I used to live there, and she posts great trail like reviews and information. And so she said that this is low trafficked trail and it leads you through subalpine meadows up to the site of an old fire lookout. It's since burned down, but the summit offers amazing views of the Cascade Mountains. And then she did note in her report that since the write up and photos went up on the website in 2015, there was a there was a fire that was actually called the 2017 Olallie Lookout Fire, and the trail has been maintained since, but it will look different than her photos that she posted. So it seems to me like at the time of the case we're talking about today, the fire lookout was still there, and since then, about 10 years later, it burned down, and it is still, not rebuilt up there. It was not in use at the time, of course. So, let's read about this trail because I want you guys to get a good understanding of this trail. So it says the trail starts at the far end of a large parking loop. There are two trailheads here, so make sure you are taking the trail at the far left of the parking area. The hike begins with a slight but steady incline through thick green forest. After half a mile, you come across a creek called Mosquito Creek. If you are into some serious bushwhacking, you can follow the creek upstream to Wolverine Lake, but the thick brush and swarm of mosquitoes makes it look pretty unappealing. After crossing Mosquito Creek, you will hike another 1.6 miles until you come to a trail junction. This junction is very important as it frequently becomes the point of getting lost for many folks who attempt this hike. Because the second part of the Olallie Mountain Trail is quite overgrown, it can be hard to see the trail to the right, and therefore you may even miss this intersection and end up going 1 mile downhill to the Olallie Meadows, which ultimately takes you farther down to Horse Lake. Make sure you are taking the trail to your right, and that is going uphill instead of going slightly left and heading downhill. This is where, in 2007, a University of Oregon professor got lost and ended up perishing. This blog does talk about the fire lookout. Now, it was originally built in 1932, so it was 88 years old before it burned down in June of 2020. It's very interesting. So I thought it had burned down in 2017, but apparently the Olallie Mountain wildfire burned the entire hill around the lookout. And then that it survived that fire, but then in 2020 it ended up burning down 3 years later. So lots of fires in these areas. So I that also means sometimes that things can be uncovered that were harder to see before, like human remains. So I'm hoping that um, we are able to get answers for this professor's disappearance. And that is going to lead us into this case. So today we are going to be talking about University of Oregon professor Daming Shu. Now, he arrived in the USA from China in the late 1980s, and he became a professor of mathematics at the University of Oregon. He and his wife, Shi Shu, I hope I'm saying that right, loved traveling to Oregon's wilderness areas for day hikes, and both of them were very fit for their ages. Now, Daming was 63 years old at this time. So on November 4th, 2007, Daming left for the Three Sisters Wilderness area to climb Olallie Mountain. This was a beautiful day. It was sunny, blue skies. It was literally the perfect day to hike. Perfect late autumn day to hike in the Cascades. And honestly, it sounds like a great time to be out in nature, alone and enjoy the nature and the hike, especially since it's not a super popular trail. Now, Doming was only dressed for a day hike. He was dressed in a white shirt and light leather jacket and no backpack. So he was just going to go quickly do this and be done, and he was going to come home. I don't know why his wife didn't go with him. It never said as to why in the source material. So I have no idea. So he left his house to go do this hike. And there was someone else actually on a hiking trip, two people, Stephanie and Paul Niedermeyer. And they actually met Doming near the peak of Olallie Mountain around 1:30 p.m. So he did make it. We do know that Doming made it to the peak. And Stephanie and Paul said that Doming only spent a few moments at the top before quickly descending, and he appeared to be in a hurry. So he was kind of acting strange, and they weren't sure why, and they didn't really talk to him either. So this was kind of like there were only three people up there, Stephanie and Paul, and then Doming, and they reported that his behavior was a little bit strange for the occasion. Stephanie and Paul, enjoyed their summit time. They enjoyed the surrounding views of the Cascade Mountains, and then they headed back down to finish the trail. And when they reached the trailhead parking lot, Stephanie and Paul saw a white Chevrolet Impala um, parked there, and they were actually surprised to see it because Dong Ming, who the car belonged to, who that was like the only person there, so they knew it was his. They had actually encountered him on the summit, and he had left before them, so he should have been back to his car by now, unless he had decided to go to the Olallie Meadows on the way down where the trail forks. So they're like, that's kind of weird, but maybe he just decided to take the longer way down, right? So they were a little bit concerned, but not like, oh my gosh, this is really concerning. So they agreed that the only logical assumption was that it belonged to another hiker on the French Peak Trail because they were like, well, if it was this man's that we saw on the summit, he would have already been back by now, or maybe he went the longer way, so it must belong to somebody else. So they're kind of like rationalizing in their minds why this car was parked here. If they saw basically someone else on the trail and they don't know exactly who it belongs to. They thought it might have been that guy's, but it wasn't. It's just kinda confusing for them, right? Like, when you're trying to think about logistics of someone that you don't know hiking at a speed that you don't know exactly where he was going. So they're just like, "Oh, well, that's kinda weird, but maybe it belongs to someone else." Um, Now by late afternoon, the sun's going down and darkness is descending over this area. The car was still sitting there, and there was still no sign of the car's owner. So this is when Stephanie and Paul got a little concerned, like more concerned. They thought like it's not like this easy hike had any challenges. Maybe he was taking his time. He was older and it wasn't like super late. And so they were concerned, but they weren't like alert the police. They weren't doing that yet. So, unfortunately, their fears were proven correct a few days later because Ming failed to show up at his home, and his wife reported him missing on the afternoon of the following day, November 5th. Now, personally, my husband always knows I tell him, "If I'm not home by this time, you need to you need to call someone." And so it's just interesting to me that Doming's wife waited a full day because he wasn't going out for an overnighter and he had no plans to stay somewhere else. So he wasn't reported missing until the next day in the afternoon. Now, on November 6th, his car was found at the Bear Flats Trail, and it contained his cell phone, water, and heavier clothing. Key pieces of his potential survival kit, like his jacket, had been left behind. So he did have some gear, but it wasn't on his person, it was in his car. And this is when authorities got kind of concerned. Now, authorities didn't know what hike he had planned, except that it was generally in the Cougar Dam area. So, search and rescue focused on a very large area covering Olallie Mountain, south of the Mackenzie Bridge, Cougar Reservoir, and the Three Sisters Wilderness area. And in the search and rescue, there were over 60 mountain rescue personnel from Eugene, Portland, Corvallis, Lincoln, Lynn, and Deschutes counties, as well as Deschutes County sheriff's officials and Eugene police. They all were participating in the search. They also deployed a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter infrared FLIR to search and from above. Even though this area is pretty forested. There are some meadows, and some open areas. Like I said, some of this is above timberline, so they're thinking maybe we could see Doming from the helicopter. Now, initially, search and rescuers and authorities thought that Doming must have taken the wrong trail at the junction and headed to Olallie Meadows instead of the parking area. But they were thinking, surely he would have noticed how different the trail looked and that there was no meadow on the way up because this is an out and back trail so that you go down the same way you go up, and if you were thinking, "Oh, I didn't see this," maybe you would think, "Oh, I must be in the wrong area." Now, it was only a mile hike to the meadows, and there was plenty of time to turn around. So they looked for him on the Olallie Meadows Trail, and they found what they believed to be his tracks near Bear Flat. However, the dogs that they were searching with inexplicably lost the tracks at that point. Now, later in the week following Doming's disappearance, the weather got really bad, temperatures dropped, and it rained and snowed. And so, without adequate winter clothing, Doming's situation became, dangerous, a lot more dangerous than it was before because he doesn't have heavy jacket. He doesn't have gear to survive, and the weather's bad and it's getting cold and wet and snowy. Now, the sheriff in charge of the search stated that the most significant challenge that Doming would face would be the weather. It had been relatively mild up until that point, but on November 8th, which is 4 days after he disappeared, temperatures in the search area fell below freezing overnight. His family said that he was very fit and an accomplished hiker, but staying overnight in these conditions would be virtually impossible in a light jacket like what he was wearing. And then on November 10th, newspapers reported that rain and fog were hampering search efforts and that the snow level was expected to drop below 47. Sorry, there was going to be snow below 4,700 feet overnight. So they're like, "It's gonna be snowy." Part of the search area was higher than that, and they were expected to have some accumulation. On Monday, November 12th, the official search was called off due to bad weather, but friends and volunteers continued to search. So we're 8 days and we're calling off the search officially because of the weather, but people are still continuing to look for him. Now, they had focused on between 50 and 100 square miles of thick forest with 19 agencies, dozens of volunteers, and over 5,000 man-hours of searching. And they didn't find him. Spoiler alert, he's never been found. So, it's really an extensive search and they haven't found much of anything. On November 15th, they were lucky, because they found something. It was one half of a Sullivan's Trail book up to page 157 that was found, and it included the Olallie mountain hike on page 154. The other half of this book had already been found in his car, so they knew that this, without a doubt, was Doming's book. But the question is, how did he get lost if he had a map with him? The trail book was found in a very rugged area of the French Peak Creek drainage on the south side of the mountain. So the thinking was that Doming must have followed the trail to Bear Flat, then headed down French Pete where there's no actual trail. French Peat Creek is full of rocks, heavy foliage, trees, and very steep and hazardous, and it's extremely difficult to traverse because of the endless fallen trees, rocks, and steep terrain. After the creek, it enters French Peat Creek Trail. It's like a tongue twister, which would have taken him back to Pat's Saddle or down Road 19 if he was alive at this point. So they found a clue, but they still haven't found Doming. And they never did. And it's really, really sad because he was an experienced hiker, he was in shape, he had a map, but things that could have saved his life, like gear and heavier clothing, he didn't have. And so this half of the book that they found, they knew it was his, and they're thinking, "Well, how the freak did he get lost if he had a map?" I mean, this is crazy. And then if he dropped the book, where is he, you know? They never found him, and 1 year later, there was a group of 45 volunteer searchers that spent an additional 400 hours looking for his remains, but nothing was ever found. His wife said the hardest part was that she had no remains nor a body to return to his family. And it's been almost 20 years, and Dameen's remains still have not been located. I mean, he is somewhere still out there in the Three Sisters wilderness, and his poor family. I couldn't find, like, a lot about his wife, but she would be much older now, and it's just really sad to think that some people pass and they still never learn what happened to their loved ones. Dameen's demise is a really, really sad story because despite a beautiful sunny day and a map, he appears to have possibly gotten disoriented and wandered off in the wrong direction to the unknown. We don't know what happened. And unfortunately, the weather turned bad as soon as he was reported missing. And given the thick, inaccessible forest around the French Peak Creek drainage where his guidebook was found, it's likely that his remains will never be discovered because of the terrain. I don't know, like, was it hypothermia or was it something more sinister? It's just this one really, like, gives me the chills to think about and talk about because he had a map, and it was a paper map, which is the kind that you should be taking out when you're hiking, but it's just really sad, and as we know, Doming took no equipment with him at all on this day hike, and that was probably his biggest mistake. Then, 5 years later, a man named Jake Dutton also disappeared from the same area while on a solo hike, but his remains were actually discovered years later. Now, hiking on your own in this area is not recommended because of how rugged it is. Jake Dutton left for a hike on the French Pete Trail in the Three Sisters Wilderness in Oregon on June 15th, 2012. Jake, he was 32 years old and a resident in Eugene, and he was a badass. He was a veteran of the US Coast Guard, and he was living his life. He had completed studying alternative medical services for pain relief through physical therapy. He was an experienced hiker and camper, and he was doing that 9.5-mile one-way trail, 19 miles round trip in the French Pete Creek area of the Three Sisters Wilderness. This is like tongue twisters. So he wasn't doing exactly the same trail that Da Ming did, but we do know that Da Ming's guidebook, his map, was found in this area, which we can only assume that he was physically in that area as well. Now, as of mid 2024, large parts of the French Pete Trail are covered in undergrowth, signs are poor, and GPS is required to follow it. It's not like a trail that you might imagine. Despite claims that camping is possible along this trail, hikers report that promising locations aren't available as much of the trail is steep and has very thick underbrush. There's actually an all trails reporting that says just be prepared for a lot of down trees that you have to scramble over and under, and some sections you might lose the trail. However, if you zigzag, I bet you can find the trail. So that's not super promising. So Jake was last seen at his apartment on June 3rd, 2012. And on Friday, June 15th, Jake completed a U.S. Forest Service permit slip to use the French Peak Trail, indicating when he started and planned to end his hike. Now, he stated on this paper that he would return by June 18th. So, Jake did what he was supposed to do. He filled out the permit slip and everything, And he had actually planned to take his nephew, who was 13, camping later on in June after a family reunion in Seaside, Oregon. Um, and it's believed that he went to the trail to scout out some campsites for this camping trip with his nephew. Now, Jake's mom, Cynthia, began to worry about him in mid June when she called to remind Jake about his older brother Christopher's upcoming birthday, but Jake couldn't be reached by cell. So his mom kind of started to worry, and on June 28th, Jake had agreed before to pick up his nephew at the Portland International Airport, but he never showed up. So it's just really interesting to me that Jake, was missing for a couple of weeks and no one really knew until he didn't show up to the airport. So Jake's brother subsequently went to Jake's apartment and found no sign of him. So Jake's brother informed authorities, and on July 9th, almost a whole month after Jake was last seen, a missing persons report was finally filed with the Eugene Police Department. 3 weeks later, the report, which contained the description and license plate of his pickup, it actually caused the US Forest Service to find the vehicle. Now, his 1998 blue Nissan Frontier pickup truck was found on July 30th, 2012, near Mackenzie Pass on Forest Road 19, near the trailhead for French Pete, which, we mentioned this area, and Doming's disappearance. Jake's backpack, inflatable boat, and hiking boots were not in the truck, and they were actually found in his apartment. So, authorities and his family are like, "Oh my god, like, where is he? Like, why is his some of his stuff here?" And he's not when his truck was found at the trailhead. Now, Jake did have his cell phone on him, but as you can guess, there's no cell phone coverage in this area of the forest. Now, the family said that they were frustrated that the Forest Service officials didn't use the permit to figure out that he had not returned from his hike and that his pickup was still at the trailhead. Now, I actually have mixed feelings about this because it is not the US Forest Service responsibility to make sure that you are being safe. Those permits are only to know how many people are in the area. Okay? So, it's just kind of funny, like, I'm not trying to sound like a bitch, but it's funny that his family is blaming the Forest Service officials, but yet their own son and brother were missing for weeks and they didn't alert authorities. It is possible that Jake didn't tell them exactly, like, "I'm gonna be home this time." But if Jake had made, these plans and then he didn't show up, why did it take them so long to file a missing persons report? And I just I don't know, like, I am married, and if I didn't come back from a hike, or my mom didn't couldn't get a hold of me and she knew that I was going backpacking, it would be 1 day tops before a missing persons report would be filed, okay? Because everybody knows that time matters, and if you can't get a hold of your son who you knew was going out, um, why didn't you call first? I just find it very interesting. So, there were 2 searches that involved law enforcement personnel, volunteers, and search and rescue dogs that occurred on July 31st and then on August 5th, and no signs of Jake were found on either of these searches. Like Jake Dutton, Doming Shoe disappeared in the same area in 2007 after summiting Mount Olallie. So, it's just very interesting, and I don't like that his family is blaming the Forest Service officials because they're not, like, keeping track of, "Oh, these people haven't come out yet," like, blah, 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 especially in an area like this. I will say it, I have said it, and I will say it again. Your safety is your own responsibility when you are recreating outside in national parks or national forests. Now, 4 years after Jake disappeared without a trace, his skeleton was found on August 24th, 2016, by a hiker, and his skeleton was located about 100 feet off of the trail. So, crazy close to the trail, about 4 miles from the trailhead. Jake's remains were found near his backpack and 2 cans of bear spray in the steep, heavily forested area. His pants were still on, but his torso was bare, and there was no evidence of trauma or gunshot wounds indicating foul play. And family members said that he was not suicidal. So, authorities, the best guess was that he died of hypothermia. His cell phone was with his remains. So, they found everything. So, unlike Doming Shu's case, they actually found his remains and all of his gear. Now, it's interesting to me that they had searches and he was only found 100 feet off of the trail, 4 miles from the trailhead. So it's like, I mean, if you're a hiker, you know, like 4 miles is not that far to, to be on a trail. And it might take someone what, an hour and a half to hike that? Maybe 2 if it's rugged. So, it's just crazy that he was basically on the trail, I would say in the vicinity of the trail. It's not like they found his remains, like, miles off of the trail, 100 feet off of the trail. If that doesn't give you an idea of how rugged this area is, I don't know what does. But it's really, really sad that they were searching for him and he was so close. Now, they were searching much later. He was probably already deceased at that time, but his family had to wait 4 years until his remains were found. Now, it's not recommended to go hiking in the wilderness alone, and certainly and not in the French Peak Trail area of Oregon. I don't think Jake left a detailed itinerary with his friends or family, and that was a fatal mistake. Now, you might be thinking, like, how could he die of hypothermia? Now, the weather in Oregon in June is relatively benign during the day, like 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius, but it can fall as low as 41 degrees Fahrenheit or 5 degrees Celsius during the night. During the night. Now, unless Jake fell into a stream without a change of clothes or got caught in a freak storm, hypothermia seems like, did it really happen? you know, and that's what the authorities came to the conclusion, but did that really happen? Given this rugged terrain, I think Jake may have fallen off trail and could not return despite only being 100 feet away. Maybe he ventured off for the call of nature or to eat something in a quiet spot. I don't know. I'm thinking he might have tripped and had some sort of tissue injury. Um, that they don't know what happened because, when you're skeleton, there's no soft tissue. Maybe he got a really bad gash and he fell and couldn't get up. We really don't know. Maybe he passed out from blood loss or I mean, there's really only guessing that can happen when there's only skeletal remains so long after someone goes missing in the wilderness. Now, as we wrap up today's episode, the stories of Daming Shu and Jake Dutton remind us that not every tragedy in the outdoors has the same ending. Jake's family at least has answers, even though they came at an unimaginable cost. Daming Shu's loved ones, however, are still waiting, still hoping that someone somewhere might find a piece of information that finally brings his remains home. The wilderness is both beautiful and unforgiving. A single wrong turn, rapidly changing weather, rugged terrain, or an unexpected injury can change lives forever. And that's why it is so important to hike prepared. Let someone know your plans, carry the proper safety gear, and never, ever, ever underestimate the environment you're exploring. Um, I just want to say that I had a difficult situation last month. It was late July, and I decided to go backpacking alone, which I do. It's not out of the usual for me. But I had my Garmin inReach on me and I was setting off on this trail and there was like 20 or 30% chance of rain. And I was like, rain's not a big deal. If you hike and backpack, you know that like rain is not a huge deal. But when it when it's thunderstorms and weather changes, that's when it becomes a big deal. So I'm like half a mile in on this backpacking trip. It's just this little one overnighter, and it's raining, and it's not pouring. It's just like sprinkling. And I'm like, So I stopped and I put my pack cover on and I'm like, okay, well, I might just keep going. But I stood there and I was thinking, do I keep going? It was cloudy, no lightning, no thunder or anything. I'm like, I don't know. I decided to keep going, which was my first mistake. And I got up to the lake where I was camping at, and it started to downpour, like downpour, thundering downpour for like 30 minutes. I was actually hiding in like some trees because it was so bad. It was windy, it was just, like, downpour, and I was like, "Oh, no." And I used my Garmin to text my husband, and I was like, "I don't know if I should come home or not, like, I just got here, and it's raining." It's, like, really coming down. And then it stopped, and it was sunny again, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is great." So I texted my husband, "I'm good. It stopped raining. Everything's fine. I'm gonna stay here tonight." Man, I jinxed myself because after I got my campsite set up, I got my tent set up and everything, it is torrential rain for like 2 hours. And my rain fly is 10 years old along with my tent, and it hasn't been treated with the rain stuff, and it's good for a little bit of rain, but it was torrential for like 2 hours. I was stuck in my tent. It's thundering, it's windy, my tent starts to get wet, my, footprint is not really helping the situation, and, parts of my tent inside are wet, my sleeping bag is getting a little bit wet. It was, like, really, really bad storms, and the temperature dropped a lot, and I'm like, "Oh, shit." Like, what do I do? So I waited, I'm it took me, like, 30 minutes to make a decision because I was like, "Oh god, like, I really don't wanna hike at night, but I also don't wanna risk suffering and maybe being cold and wet at night," and, I'm at above 10,000 feet of elevation, so I'm like, I don't know." So I made the decision at like 7 o'clock to pack all my shit up and to head back to my car. And it took me like 30 minutes to pack everything up. And I headed out on the hike back to my car. I was so pissed. Texted my husband, I'm coming back. And, a lot of people that I know that know me that I go backpacking and all sorts of stuff, um, they are like, "Wow, you're so brave. You hike alone, you backpack alone." That's not scary to me. Sleeping in a tent alone in the wilderness is not scary to me. Hiking alone is not scary to me, but I did find something that is terrifying to me. Hiking alone at night. After the sun's gone down, I only had my headlamp, and I was so scared. I had to hike alone. I had to hike through the woods. It was pitch black, and it was lightning, so that was super fun. So, again, like, when I'm saying that these people should have done this, should have done this, I have also made bad judgment calls, and I'm just lucky that they ended a little bit better than, others. You think, you think your brain thinks, "Oh, I can make decisions just fine." But sometimes your gut and your intuition knows, and you make bad judgment calls. And so I made 3 bad judgment calls and ended up paying for it later on, not with my life or anything, but it was bad. So I completely understand how people might think this is an easy, I'm just gonna go scout out campsites, it's gonna be fine. Like Jake, he just thought he was gonna be gone for a few days and shit, something happened. He was only got 4 miles on the trail, or maybe he was coming back out, we don't know. And the same for Doming. Maybe he just thought, "I'm just gonna quickly go up and come down and be home," and unfortunately, that's not what happened. So if you have any information regarding the disappearance of Daming Shu, no matter how insignificant it may seem, please contact the appropriate authorities. Even the smallest detail or find out in the wilderness can make a difference in a long running investigation. I'm also linking a like a um I don't even a blog post that Stephanie and Paul wrote about their experience hiking Olallie Mountain and with Dami Shu's disappearance. That's in the show notes. So if you want to read that, it's very interesting. Highly recommend it. So I hope that you guys are being safe and making good judgment calls, because no matter how experienced you are, something can go wrong at any given time. I hope you're enjoying your summer. And if you work in education like me, we got this. We got this. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.